Today we're going to talk about love. It's going to be a tough one. So many people have tried it. The divorce rate among couples is over 50%. And then you find of that, say 45% that stay together, how many are staying together for other reasons, like maybe they don't believe in divorce, or for the sake of the kids, or finances, or the embarrassment, religious reasons. So when it all boils down to, there's a very small percentage of people who actually stay together simply because that's what they desire. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, because we want to find some wellness. I know too many people who are divorced and older, maybe close to my age, or a little younger, or a little older, that have been divorced for quite some time, or maybe never married, kind of wish they had, and kind of at this particular point in life acquiesce to, oh well, this is just the way my life is supposed to be. And so we're going to discuss this today. Why? Why is it so difficult? The other day, a couple of years ago, I was at Panera Bread. It was early in the morning, it was my day off, and I wanted to do some work on the computer, and I just wanted a different environment. It reminds me of my school days when I was studying for my associate degree so many years ago. That's where I would study, Panera Bread. That's where I would do all my homework and study. And so it's just a familiar place. So I went there. It was probably maybe around 1 o'clock, or between 11 and 1. And while I was sitting there, getting myself together, I noticed a couple that was sitting at a table together. They were an old couple. They probably in about their 80s or so. And they were just sitting together at this table, and she was doing a crossword puzzle or something in a little book, some type puzzle. And he was reading a book. And it looked like they were totally ignoring each other. And I know initially when I had seen things like that back in the past, in my mind I'm thinking, man, I sure don't want to be like that when I get older, being married and all. But that particular day I was looking at them and I'm thinking, they got it. They understand. They're together, they've probably been together 50 years, I don't know. But they'd come to the point to recognize that they didn't have to be entertainment for each other, but they were there for each other. And so there was no selfishness involved. There was no need to be the center of attention. There was no need to be waited upon and needs met and focus on what I'm focused on and not what you're focused on. No, they were content doing their own thing together. And I believed at that moment when I saw that they got it. Okay. I don't know if they always had it. I don't know if it was a rocky or tumultuous road there. But at that particular moment, I saw something in them, a satisfaction in the relationship, a satisfaction in each other's presence. And they were just doing their own thing. It was cool. So we're really going to talk about this love thing, because I think there's a lot of confusion, and it's confusion that goes through everyone, through all of us, through me, through everyone. It's a dysfunction that I believe starts as children. When we're watching even the Snow White and the Prince, we're watching all the cartoons, the Disney cartoons and the Disney princesses, the love stories, the fairy tales. And so from the youngest age, the young kids begin daydreaming. That's going to be me one day, swept off my feet, little birds flying around our heads, tweeting happy little tweets, and just content life in love. And that's what we search for. I understand and I know that girls, at times, or at least they used to, would be practicing writing their names and the last name of someone else, or maybe considering what kind of house they want to live in, or how many kids they have and want to have, or the white picket fence and all that stuff. Just dreaming and daydreaming about a future. Only to find later in life those dreams become dashed because things didn't turn out quite the way they anticipated them to be. Okay. And so I believe that because of the movie industry, the television industry, the storybooks, all the things that we are inundated with from the time we're very young, paint us a poor picture of what love is. Can maybe give us an incomplete picture or an erroneous picture of what love is. And we want to delve into this kind of deeply for a moment because we want to consider whatever it is that we desire in life, whether it's a certain type of nice car, nice home, job, education, the person, the significant other in our lives. What's the purpose of anything that we desire in our lives? It's because we feel that that thing or that person, that place, those things are going to satisfy us. They're going to make us happy because it's the desires of our hearts. So right off the bat, what I'm suggesting is even from a love perspective, we're even approaching this thing initially from an unhealthy position. It's what can I get? What will satisfy me? What will make me happy? And then when we talk about years and years of dreaming and considering and thinking about this thing, it becomes to be very exciting. The greatness of the anticipation of this is what I'm going to get. I'm going to get this thing that I've been looking for all of my life. And so then you meet the significant someone. And then we make the wedding plans after a courtship, and really enjoying each other's presence and just thrilled that finally found this person. And have a fabulous wedding. Even if it's not expensive, it's still fabulous because it's that thing, that culmination, of all of our dreams, all of our thoughts, our hopes, our desires, and all that stuff, all the way up until this point. And see, the culmination is that wedding. And what I'm suggesting is that even in itself is going to be a letdown, because if that's the culmination, where else is there to go but down, right? And so we find out, it doesn't take long before we find out is that relationship, that love, that life, married life, isn't what we expected. It's not what we anticipated it to be. You've heard people say that marriage is rough. Well, it is, kind of. Why is marriage rough? What's rough is dealing with the reality that first of all, what you thought it was going to be isn't, and then how to maintain, how to hang in there, how to stick. So as long as you have this divorce rate that's so high, 50 plus, 55 plus or so, just recognize that it took years oftentimes. So when you look at how long people were married before they were divorced, they gave it a try. They gave it a good try most of the time. But eventually they just gave up, unless there's another reason, that they might be hanging on to it for, which is always good to have, And so I think the biggest problem that we have to deal with is that part that I know selfishness is such a harsh word, but self-ishness. Focusing on ourselves, needing our own needs met, our own desires met, that bringing to fruition that childhood and that teen and that early young person vision of what relationship is supposed to be like, bringing that to fruition. Kind of difficult. Why? Because it's just not real. It's not love. It's not love when the relationship is based on, in your mind, based on what it is you think you deserve or you require. Because that's love, but that's only love for oneself. See, there are different types of love. There's the love that you have for your family. There's the love that you have for your friends, There's the love that you have for society. Service for the society, And then there's that romantic love you have with your partner. But there's another kind of love that the Greeks sort of focused in on, and it was the love that is long-term, that only grows with time. That type of love. That's what I believe those two old folks figured out that was sitting at Panera Bread. So we're going to have to deal with this, because I was speaking to a gentleman recently, a friend of mine, and he was from another country. But we were having a conversation about love. What is love? And I was amazed at our conversation that he didn't agree with me, that his definition of love was a lot different than my definition of love. And the reality is, he felt just as amazed that I didn't agree with his definition of love. His feeling was that obsession is simply a sign of a deep, deep love. He even kind of justified that even beating your wife is simply because you love her so much that you don't want to lose her. And I found that quite amazing. But then again, that's my perspective. This is an educated gentleman. I think I'm an educated gentleman. We have these two different, ideas about what love is. And so they got to me thinking, because he's a good guy, and I think I'm a good guy, and we had a conversation, and we're friends, so it was a very healthy conversation. But it was we were on different sides of this particular topic. And so and I promised him that I'd be thinking about this. And so my feeling is then that we have a difficult. His definition of love was different than my definition of love. Okay, I believe that there's a love and that there's an emotion. Okay, and of course love is an emotion, but I believe that there is an emotion that is without love, that is simply a love for oneself, and then there is a love that is a love for another individual. And I think for that love to be right, for that love to be healthy, there has to be a love for yourself and the individual. What I'm suggesting is most folks, and innocently enough, this is not intention, but most folks simply have the love for themselves and they like a person a lot, okay? So their self-love trumps the like that they have for someone else. And so as long as they're being satisfied, as long as their desires are being met, as long as I'm feeling like, I'm getting what I'm supposed to have out of this relationship, what I've always dreamed of, I like this individual. Okay, and so that's the issue, and so what happens is when they don't get what they want, okay, because you're dealing with another individual that has just as real and just as relevant personality and feelings as you do. So if they have the same type feeling you do, that they love themselves and they just like you a lot, you have two individuals who cannot deal with being disappointed, who cannot deal with not getting what they want. And that's where most of the conflicts arise. You have two intelligent people that have a love for themselves, which is healthy, which is what people are supposed to have, and they have an extreme like for the individual that they've married. And see, that extreme like coupled with the love that they have for themselves and the desires that they have that they feel are being met, that's in their own minds, we love each other. But no, you have two individuals that love themselves and they like the other as long as their own personal needs are being met. Okay? And of course, we all know, as adults, everyone's personal needs are not always going to be met. And that's when you find conflict in relationships, when an individual feels that their needs are not being met. Okay? And so when you have two individuals, both of them feeling this same way about themselves, loving themselves, which is normal, and extremely liking the person they've married, the issues arise when they're not satisfied personally. Okay, that's one type. Another type is when an individual does love themselves, and they love this person. But this person loves themselves and just likes this person a lot. So the person that loves healthily, and I believe that's very rare, is that they will find themselves at the short end of the stick, always attempting to appease their partner who loves themselves and just likes this person. And so that's a very tiresome place to be eventually. Simply trying to please someone and not getting any reciprocating pleasure. Okay? That's difficult. And so when I was speaking to my friend, he was amazing me when he was telling me that a man beats his wife because he loves his wife. Because he desperately just doesn't want to lose her. But see, that's that selfish. That's he loves himself and likes her a lot. And so he can't see losing her because she is the source of his satisfied desires. Okay? And so how can you beat someone that you love? You don't. You can't. You simply love yourself. And out of desperation, you're trying to force this individual to stay with you. That's self-love. Okay? That's not love for the individual. Okay? If I can't live without you, you're not going anywhere. You can leave, but not out that door. However you want to paint it. That's self-love. That's not love for the individual. And I believe that's the situation that we have probably in most of the, I'd go up into the 90 percentile range, up in the high 90s. This is the issue that we have, all across the world. And in of course, in our nation as well, because that's what we're primarily speaking to, is that we love ourselves, but we have a difficult time crossing over into that love for other individuals. We just like them a lot as long as the situation is presenting itself to satisfy me. And so this concept then, it kind of is relevant in most of the situations in our lives. There are situations where someone might have kids, a woman or a man might have kids from a previous relationship and then meet someone else and get married. And that individual they're married to resents those kids, and those kids remind them of the person their spouse used to be with. So that right there is an individual loving themselves, liking another person very much, but this situation on the side here is bothering them because their desires, their needs aren't totally being met. They see a competition here. They have a difficult time dealing with the fact that this person that they're with cared for someone else just like they care for them at the moment. And that's a problem because the individual has self-love, and they're being challenged by past relationship of this individual's, and these kids are like an everyday reminder. And so that's one thing in the individual, but then we have the other, the individual's actually the parent of the kids, and so at times they begin mistreating their own kids for the sake of their new partner. And so what is that? That is not a love for your children. Is it a love for oneself? It can't be a love for oneself, because your children are a part of you. It's that unhealthy feeling of need to keep this person in your life. So that may be a self-love because you are determined to keep this person in your life, or just an unhealthy need that you have to where you only feel complete with this other individual in your life. And I think this is an issue that many of us have as well, in our marriages, is that we feel, we go into relationships believing that this will complete me, this person will complete me, you complete me. We've heard that, too many times in romantic stories, but no, an individual cannot complete you. You have to be complete within yourself, and it's a very difficult place to be. Because we start off, from the moment we are cognizant to the reality of the world and relationships, and even the storybook relationships, we're seeing unrealistic expectations, and we build upon those, and this is what we expect in life. It's not even intentional, it just happens. And so we're disappointed because it doesn't manifest. And so you find people, even with their own kids, mistreating their own kids, abusing their own kids, and seeing that this will satisfy, placate their new spouse. You see women going to prison with their husbands for having abused and even killed their own children, thinking somehow this is going to validate me to this person, this spouse. That's a very low self-image. That's a need within an individual, an obsession that they have to be with this person. And we have that all the time. And so it's very interesting that we have to recognize the dysfunction that we have within ourselves and why it's very difficult, very difficult. You've heard the term that a lot of divorce attorneys use is irreconcilable differences. And as manufactured as that may sound, it's actually true. Because we're looking at a situation from a different plane, it's like speaking to someone from another culture about a particular topic, and they have their own cultural views about that topic. You have your own, and you're talking about the same thing, but you're not. Because what you were raised to believe is this, I was raised to believe it's that. And so we may be talking about the same topic, but our view on that topic is completely different. It's the same in religion. What we're raised to believe is true, and so we swear, there's only one God but Allah, or we swear that, if you don't embrace God and Jesus, you're going to hell, whatever we are raised with, that's what we begin to believe, and we believe it wholeheartedly, no matter how destructive it is. And so I'm suggesting that I don't know what the answer is. And the answer is really a self assessment, and to be honest with yourself. And I don't know if you believe in prayer. Sometimes, in order to stay married, you need prayer for real, because that sort of encourages you a little bit. But what I would suggest is, and what I consider working on, is praying for God, help me be what this person needs me to be, in love, and help that person be what I need them to be in love. Begin to pray like that, rather than God change him or God change her, which is the natural inclination. Why? Because we believe we're right and they're wrong. And then we believe that they're acting this way because they don't love me. Well, it might be true. They like you a whole lot. You like them a whole lot. That's where the self-assessment's going to be. Do you really love them? Why is it's so devastating that you don't get what you believe you desire? Why is it so devastating that they don't get what they desire? And can one individual be happy while the other isn't, and call that love? I don't know. Or can an individual get to a point where they just give up trying so hard, or give up on their desires? See what's healthy is, but it initially might seem unhealthy, is to begin to reevaluate your expectations and your definition of what you thought love was. And say, hey, well, maybe my definition is skewed. Maybe the family I came up in, they were somewhat dysfunctional. And what I gleaned from that situation, that relationship, may not be quite right and may have plagued me. I know people that have been married 3 and 4 times. I know people that are married who are miserable. I know people who are married who are cheating on their spouses. I know people who are married who are indulging in money spending lifestyles tremendously, in a sense to satisfy a place of dissatisfaction in their life as it relates to what they perceive love is supposed to be. I'm just suggesting that people have to work together on this. This is the most difficult thing in the world. The most difficult thing in the world is to judge oneself. It's easy to judge everybody else, because what are you using as a comparative? As a comparative base, you're using yourself. You're basing all of your judgments, you're basing them on what you believe or what you know truth is. And so we're not really willing to judge ourselves, and we are often the culprit. We are the culprit. And so we can, people can go to counseling. I remember my wife and I, before we got married, we went to this big church in the city, and they had a very good counseling program. So we went to get pre-marriage counseling. So we sat down and we were talking to the marriage counselor, and she was giving us, her, little spiel and everything. But by the time the conversation was over, she was crying, the counselor was crying, and we were giving her advice on her life. I mean, it doesn't matter what the textbook education is. The reality, we have to realize that what we've bought into often on what relationships are, the fairy tale relationships, on what we are supposed to be receiving in relationships, just isn't reality. And the moment but it's important, because it's also important not to self-deprecate. That is, not to think so lowly of yourself that your needs mean nothing and you spend your time catering to the needs of the other individual. That's not love either. That is sort of a self-image that is lower than it should be as well. It's a need that we have to make sure we don't lose this individual. And that's what we're fighting for. That's what we're living for. Waiting on them hand and foot. Are you okay? Are you okay? That's no life to live either. What I want to lay this down is that there are times that we have to struggle our way through to find our way to the other side. We have to get to the place where we determine not to give up, but not to simply maintain dysfunction, but to figure out what's going on. And what I'm sharing with you is a figuring out, okay? So, because life is short. And sometimes what I believe is we have to have other things outside of ourselves to hang on to cling on to justify the journey, to justify the relationship long term. Even though it may be a struggle, there are things that you hang on to. Kids at times is the thing that you need to hang on to. Okay, that's the justification. Okay, I'm struggling now, but my child is too important. My child's future is based on the relationship that they see. Now, it may not be dysfunctional, but what they're going to see is that we are determined. And so oftentimes the child or the children are the ones that are the reasons why we hang in there. And what I want to share with you is a very important concept as far as the kids are concerned. There's so many people that believe, well, I got to live my life and my kids are second. You know, it's me and my spouse and then the kids. No, that's not correct. Because those are different types of love. There's a love for your kids and there is a love for your romantic love for your spouse. And one doesn't trump the other. Your child is a part of you, okay? Your child is you. So you can't put that aside and put them in order of priority. This relationship is more important than a relationship with my kids. No, they're just different types of love, but they have the same priority, okay? And so again, what you're doing is, are you sacrificing your child? You don't have to sacrifice your child. Because if an individual spouse is asking you to sacrifice your child, that individual really is loving themselves more than they're liking you, okay? So, because a spouse isn't going to do that. A good spouse, a loving spouse, isn't going to insist that you turn your back on your kids. And because your primary goal at this moment is raising your kids so they don't have to go through the dysfunction that you've had to live through, okay? So the kids are something that if you look at them properly, and you embrace them properly, and you recognize the value in them, in your relationship with them, that's a glue that helps keep the marriage together even on rocky times. It's very important. And I want to share this thing with you as well. Love from a child, even though it's a different type of love than your romantic love, is a good picture of what love is actually supposed to be. It's an unconditional love, but that unconditional love has conditions, okay? Unconditional love doesn't accept abuse, okay? Unconditional love doesn't accept mistreatment, okay? So that's an unconditional love, but still, even unconditional love must be reciprocated. And you see that with your kids. You see kids have a very high tolerance for a parent's failure, okay? You can have an alcoholic, a drug addict, whatever kind of person that parent is, that child is still going to love that parent for a very long time, up to a point. There comes a point of abuse where that child just can't take it anymore, okay? But just recognize that the child is the glue. And other things are glue. Projects are glues. Have projects that you're working on together. Things that you're working on together. Okay? One of the most destructive attitudes toward a relationship is simply expecting the mate, the spouse, to be on board with your desires. Okay? Especially if you're two halfway intellectual people, you're going to see things differently, and that has to be respected. But the one thing I think that we have to come to terms with, if we want to have a successful marriage and situation, is that I am probably messed up. Both people need to just accept that. It's sort of like I came back into this religion thing, this spirituality, after having been an atheist for 10 years. It's like, okay, everything I believe is probably wrong. Let's start from here. And just what I call walk with your eyes open and build from that. But if that is your attitude and your spouse doesn't have that attitude, it's not going to work. If your spouse has that attitude and you don't, it's not going to work. Both individuals have to realize that they are the product of the environments in which they were raised. And if that environment was dysfunctional, and it probably was in one way or another, you have some of that in you, okay? And this is what is sabotaging your relationships. It's probably not your spouse. They're sabotaging their relationship. You're sabotaging your relationship. Both need to come together and recognize and talk and recognize what it is that's going on here. Don't assume just because this is a desire that you have. Your desire isn't the love. Love is the love. What you desire is either functional or dysfunctional. Okay? So when you're dealing with two people, your desires don't trump their desires, and their desires don't trump your desires. And so this is where often we have a conflict, is because two individuals aren't seeing things eye to eye. So at this particular point, if you really want this to work, you have to recognize that your desires are not more important than their desires, and they have to realize that their desires are not more important than your desires. And that is simply it. But the moment you begin insisting, or they begin insisting, to have our own needs met, regardless of what the other thinks, it's not going to work. Now they might hang in there and give the appearance of something working, but that's not working. And we can do is we can get all caught up into our own desires and not having our desires met and acquiescing to, oh, well, this person's going to meet my desires. And so I shut down. But that's me. But I'm satisfying my own psyche by putting it on them. And they're often putting it on me. And so you have a lot of responses then based on a selfish assessment and conclusion. So I know this is a lot to digest, but it's real. And the question is, how do you want to end this thing? How do you want to live your life? How do you want to grow up alone, live alone, grow old alone, buy a dog, you know? Or do you want to have someone like that old couple that was sitting at Panera reading the book and doing the crossword puzzle? Have somebody to grow old with. I think right there that's the beginning of the insight into correcting our situation. Because we began with an unhealthy expectation or belief in what relationships were supposed to be like, that whole Disney princess thing. And so we even have that big old wedding that resembles the princess wedding and all. And so where we start is, I believe, is looking at ourselves and saying, okay, that didn't work. That's not working. What is it that we really want in life out of a relationship as we grow old? And maybe start at age 80. And ask yourself, what exactly is it do I want? What exactly do I have to give? And this is what two people have to, this has to be done together. And I think what we come to the conclusion is, as we grow older, just as we grow older and we change our attitudes, about life and about the desires we have, I'll be 68 in a couple of months, 2026. And my attitude about life is different now than it was 20 years ago. My attitude 20 years ago was just doing everything that I can do, and I'm still kind of like that guy now. But now, when I eat, I'm thinking, okay, what kind of food am I eating? Did I get enough exercise? Did I get enough sunlight? Did I get enough sleep? I'll be thinking differently because that's for my health. That's for my long-term health. I want to live a long time, but I want to be healthy. That's the way I think now versus when I was younger. I wasn't even thinking about health. I was just moving and going. But it changes. So we need to then begin to look at our lives and our relationships as we get older and ask ourselves, what is it we want for our future? And I think what we want for our future is for companionship. Someone to grow old with. And it begins to sort of shake up that initial myth of what we thought a relationship was supposed to be like. And not only that I have someone to grow old with, I can be someone that this individual can grow old with, And I believe then opportunities will begin, once you begin to adjust that it's not simply about my desires and what I want for the future and I need this and I need that. When both individuals come to that place, they're able to then come together and figure together what we want for our future. See, although the preacher says when you get married, now the two are one, and all that stuff, the reality is they're never thinking that way. They're thinking, okay, what am I going to get? I want this, I want that, I want this, and then the arguments ensue. But no, at a particular point in life, if you've survived long enough, you begin thinking, what can we do together? What do you want to do? And the other is, what do you want to do? It's not what I want to do and what you want to do. It's we're both concerned with what the other wants, and we begin working together like that, man. I'm a firm believer that if you have two people that are less concerned about their own desires and more concerned about the desire of their spouse, then both needs will be met, because both are seeking to meet the needs of the other. But if you're both thinking, what I need, and what you're thinking what you need, we're not considering each other. Okay, and I believe that's the key. Now there is hope, but it's going to take a whole reassessment, reevaluation. Look at the reality, look at your life, look what's come up with, and look what you believed marriage was supposed to be like. And then look at the divorce rate, and then the people that are simply staying together because they really want to be together. There's not too many people hanging in there willingly. Okay, so I'm just saying that evidently the image or the model of what marriage was presented to us was incorrect. We are dealing with dysfunctions that have lasted for generations in our own family trees. But we have the ability to stop that right here and recognize that, redefine what love is. Most of the time, I would say in the high 90%, you have people, they're loving themselves and liking a lot the person that they marry. So the moment their needs are not being met, their like begins to adjust. Okay, and often not for the better. Just kick this around. I know this is happy. Leave your comments, because I'm interested to think what other people think. This was a conversation I had with my buddy yesterday, so this is new stuff. I'm just thinking about it, flowing with it. I'd be interested to see what everybody else thinks. You take care.